Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Helpful hackers, controversial content, and streaming services. Plus this day in history with Woodstock and our song of the day by Moon Boots on your Morning Monarchy. For August 15th, 2017, I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome to wherever you are for another hour-long blast of listener-supported media brought to you by you, coming to you live, as always, from the Media Monarchy studios up here in what I like to call peak Portland. It has achieved its peak, and we're glad you're here. Huge thanks to all our patrons, supporters, PayPalers, subscribers, lovers, friends, everybody. MediaMonarchy.com/support. Glad you're here. Truth Seeker app, Radio, Confluence.com. A huge thanks to all of you. We are streaming live from the Media Monarchy Kingdom. Tuesday is Tech Tuesday. We call it Cyber Space War. Hashtag Cyber Space War. And all the stories that we're about to talk about, we tweet out about an hour of showtime. So if you're listening live, you can follow along. Glad you're here. Hope you're doing well. Car, cube, garden, whenever, wherever you are, we're glad you're here. Fear-free look at what's really going on in the news, my friends. We've been doing this for nearly 12 years, and we don't jump on bandwagons. It's maybe one of my favorite things about doing Media Monarchy is just slow and steady, stay in the course, not freaking out, not knee-jerking out about every little thing that comes along, let alone everything that comes along every 4 to 8 years. Let's glance at the breaking lamestream news before we dive into our cyberspace war news. The Washington Compost says Trump acts like the president of the red states of America. You know, I was just saying in the chat just a little bit ago. And we usually launch up the stream about 15 minutes before showtime, play a little tunes, get our chat going. You can join us in the Discord app. We are using Discord, at least for now. Speaking of bandwagon jumping, they're going to save you from scary content. So just like all the tech companies are basically squashing down things they don't like because now, of course, the attention is too large. They only give a crap about making money. And now when things get ugly, that starts to hamper their money-making abilities. So that's the only time they're really going to change things. And again, they are closed platforms. There's lots of terms and services. You got to agree to what they want. That's why we're building our own alternatives. Not the least of which is something like BitChute.com. Yesterday's Morning Monarchy up on BitChute. YouTube didn't like it, though. It was the song. I won't claim any sort of big censorship action. Elsewhere in the breaking lamestream news, no, I mean, the only thing we're missing, and this is what I was saying in the chat a little bit ago, is Charles Manson in the news. I'm actually kind of surprised Charles Manson isn't in the news. His helter-skelter pretty much ghosts all over everything we've been seeing, at least back to Trayvon. And we can also look at the Charleston church shooting. All of these events, divide and conquer, helter-skelter actions have slowly been ratcheting up. And it all looks so fake and staged. And again, I'm not saying it's all crisis actors and fake. I'm just saying it's people playing silly roles. And it looks like a staged production because the people aren't very good at it. I guess it's like those muscles you have to work out. If you're not actually good at exercising your freedom, it's going to be pretty awkward and you're going to hurt and you're going to pull a hammy. The left set out to divide and unleash the forces of reaction. That's the Daily Telegraph out of Australia. Racist extremists and not many sides brought terror to Charlottesville. Meanwhile, over in Durham, North Carolina, protesters could be charged for bringing down Durham, North Carolina Confederate statue. Of course, there's lots of great footage of a bunch of idiot white people pulling down statues that they just suddenly got mad about on November 9th. They were all cool with it through the 8 years of Obama. I'm really surprised. I don't know. Weren't people supposed to be pulling down racist statues back during the Barry Soetoro years? Why weren't you guys doing it then? It's usually because things are about 8 years, 10 years late, and generally people are only doing anything, asking how high to jump when the TV box tells them to. Now, your TV box has been replaced by your Facebook box, but essentially the action's all the same. Trump retweets Fox News story on potential Arpaio pardon. And USA Today puts it quite simply, battle over Civil War monuments prompts rallies across the USA. And they would love to get you into the idea that we're going to have a new Civil War. Two fake sides leading towards the synthesis of a new world order. If you're taking part in these things, you might be a pawn of the New World Order, as our friends at Activist Post are writing about this morning. Now, let's take a very important look, always, at the fact check, which is now provided in your breaking lamestream news. Pompeo distorts China's nuclear policy. That's from factcheck.org. Purdue cites data on immigrant households benefiting from social welfare programs. That's PolitiFact. Antifa member photographed beating police officer? ? Snopes? Shocker. We did actually find out that Antifa means anti-First Amendment. I'm not sure if you guys knew that. Chris Pratt hasn't slept since Anna Faris split is a made-up story. That's from the Gossip Cop. And here you go from PolitiFact. InfoWars' Alex Jones falsely says George Soros, Hillary Clinton instigated Charlottesville violence. That's your fact check, because you don't have critical thinking skills to rub together. You have to have multinational corporations decide what you should think. Not only decide what you think, but decide what you think about stories they decided to tell you about. Choices actually are becoming pretty simple. You are listening to The Morning Monarchy. That's a look at your lamestream news. It is Tuesday, August 15th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Let's dive into your cyberspace war news as Marcus Hutchins, a young British researcher credited with derailing the global cyber attack in May called WannaCry, he got arrested for allegedly creating and distributing malicious software designed to collect bank account passwords, U.S. authorities said last Thursday. News of Hutchins' detention came as a shock to the cybersecurity community. Many had rallied behind the researcher, whose quick thinking helped control the spread of the WannaCry ransomware attack that crippled thousands of computers earlier this year.
A British-based cybersecurity researcher praised for helping to stop a global attack earlier this year has been arrested and charged in the United States over an unrelated hacking case. Marcus Hutchins was detained in Las Vegas and has been accused of involvement with malware known as Kronos, which stole online banking details and credit card data in 2014 and 2015. The 23-year-old was greeted as a hero for apparently helping to stop the WannaCry attack, which infected computers, causing widespread disruption, including in the UK's health service, in over 150 countries. The charges filed in Wisconsin allege he created and sold Kronos on internet forums. Other researchers have reacted with surprise and skepticism.
Hutchins was detained in Las Vegas on his way back to Britain from an annual gathering of hackers and information security gurus. A grand jury indictment charged Hutchins with creating and distributing malware known as the Kronos banking Trojan. Such malware infects web browsers, then captures usernames, passwords when an unsuspecting user visits a bank or other trusted location, enabling cyber theft. Well, there's a problem right there. I don't trust those organizations. The indictment filed in a Wisconsin federal court last month alleges that Hutchins and another defendant whose name was redacted. Gosh, I wonder why his name was redacted. Probably because he works for the feds. Conspired between July 2014 and July 2015 to advertise the availability of the Kronos malware on internet forums, sell the malware, and then profit from it. And that's how that works. The indictment also accuses Hutchins of creating the malware. Authorities said the malware was first made available in early 2014 and marketed and distributed through Alphabay, a hidden service on the Tor network. But of course, the so-called Department of Justice announced just last month in July that the Alphabay darknet marketplace was shut down after an international law enforcement effort. So they got to run the stuff. Hutchins' arraignment was postponed Thursday in U.S. District Court in Vegas by a magistrate judge who gave him until Friday afternoon to determine if he wants to hire his own lawyer. Hutchins was in Las Vegas for DEF CON, an annual cybersecurity conference that ended Sunday. On Wednesday, Hutchins made comments on Twitter that suggested he was at an airport getting ready to board a plane for a flight home. He never left Nevada. Jake Williams, a respected cybersecurity researcher, said he found it difficult to believe Hutchins is guilty. The two men have worked on various projects, including training material for higher education, for which the Briton declined payment. Well, that right there means he's crazy. He declined payment? That means he obviously doesn't work for the gangsters. He's a stand-up guy, Williams said in a text chat. I can't reconcile the charges with what I know about him. Now, we can also look in our chat right now. And our friend Norman Sentry notes, DEF CON was kind of a bloodbath this year, and very little interesting came of it. And I said, oh, lots of infighting? Says, no, folks getting fired and arrested. A Justice Department spokesman confirmed the 22-year-old Hutchins was arrested last Wednesday in Vegas. Officer Rodrigo Pena, a police spokesman in Henderson near Las Vegas, said Hutchins spent the night in federal custody in the city lockup. Andrew Mabbitt, British digital security specialist who had been staying in Las Vegas with Hutchins, said he and his friends grew worried when they got radio silence from Hutchins for hours. The worries deepened when Hutchins' mother called to tell him the young researcher hadn't made his flight home. Mabbitt said he eventually found Hutchins' name on a detention center website. News of his indictment Thursday left colleagues scrambling to understand what happened. We don't know the evidence the FBI has against him. However, we do have some circumstantial evidence that he was involved in that community at the time. The big question is the identity of the co-defendant in the case, whose name is redacted. Why is it blacked out? Maybe the other guy testified against him. The co-defendant allegedly advertised the malware online. Hutchins is accused of creating and transmitting the program. Now, a guy that's the president of Rendition InfoSec speculated that the co-defendant might have been caught up in the takedown of Alpha Bay and framed Hutchins in exchange for a plea deal. The problem with creation software, or rather, software creation, is that often a program includes code written by multiple programmers. Prosecutors might need to prove that Hutchins wrote code with specific targets. Williams pointed to a July 13, 2014 tweet by Hutchins, whose moniker is @MalwareTechBlog, asking if anyone had a sample of Kronos to share. Don't have a square to spare. I've written code that other people have injected malware into, said Graham. We know that large parts of Kronos were written by other people. So that right there, he's saying, I wrote code that other people messed with. I know in the last New World Next Week, James Corbett and I both have a copy of The Last Circle about Danny Castellaro and the Promise software. That's a classic story, and it's 30 years old. That's not only 30-year-old story, but 30-year-old technology that even at the time, we don't know how recent it was. So I think that's a good way we transition from yesterday's Morning Monarchy episode that wrapped up with that amateur drone operator that landed on Queen Elizabeth, on the UK massive aircraft carrier. They can look at that in sort of a white hat way. Was he hoping to show them their security is garbage? That's what Marcus did, and he gets arrested for the privilege. So let's look at another way people are putting on some white hats to save us from our new tech overlords. Because it turns out that scooping a big juicy bug bounty reward from Google is as easy as tampering with its host header. Or at least that's what one crafty Uruguayan high schooler with a cybersecurity ambition did to pull it off. The Big G, that's, Alphabet Incorporated, has rewarded Ezequiel Perea $10,000 after the independent security researcher came across a vulnerability that allowed coaxing one of the company's back-end servers into granting hackers access to confidential data. Aimlessly toying around with some Google services, the resourceful high school researcher discovered that using popular vulnerability scanner Burp Suite, B-U-R-P, Burp Suite, to modify the host header made it possible to enter some internal App Engine applications, .googleplex.com to be exact. What tipped Pereira off that something might be wrong was that, unlike other Google servers he tried, one of the website's security measures weren't properly set up. This allowed him to connect to the website, yaks.googleplex.com, without having his username or account checked. Once he was in, the homepage redirected him to a page that contained numerous links to various Google services and infrastructures, but more intriguingly, the footer read, Google Confidential. That's when the young researcher decided to quit poking around their website and report it right away. He reported the bug on July 11th and promptly received a response from Google informing him its security team will circle back to him once it's had a chance to assess the severity of the vulnerability. He eventually received the $10,000 bounty on August 4th. That's pretty good. That's less than a month. The search engine giant has refrained from telling the high school student precisely what information the website contained, but its cybersecurity team remarked that the large bug bounty was rewarded because the researchers found some variants of the same vulnerability that could have put sensitive data at risk, data that could have cost Google millions of dollars. Millions of zeros and ones made up. Wiped out. Google has, of course, since eliminated the issue, according to Pereira. The high schooler has documented in more detail the steps he took to breach Google's network in a blog post that's been posted to sites.google.com. For those inspired by Pereira's brilliant work, one thing to keep in mind is that seeking and disclosing vulnerabilities ought to be done in a responsible manner, so make sure to peruse the criteria for a Google Vulnerability Report program here. Links included. And of course, everything we say and play will always be included in the show notes so you can continue your own research, get these articles, do more work, report back to us. Keep us straight. Don't take anything I say for gospel truth. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy, cyberspace war style. And as I've noted in the past, anytime we take time off, whether it's a day or a week and a half, it's generally next to impossible to catch up with everything. And you might know, longtime listeners know, sometimes my OCD problem. I think I can cover every single thing, but I can't. But we can do a lot with your help. And again, we're not only crowdfunded, we are crowdsourced. All this news we're talking about right now has all been brought to you by you. It's been tweeted by you using hashtag cyberspace war. Like our buddy Sean Cathcart, like your friend Dumbfuck. You gotta love the names. Our friend Ray Vahi. So I guess as long as we're talking about Google, there's another very large story that I won't even try to get all into. It's funny when you read these stories that say, anybody who doesn't live under a rock would have heard on this story. And I was like, well, I guess I was living under a rock last week because I was out having fun, living and loving and enjoying music in an outdoor festival. You know, some of the things we're actually fighting for to be able to do. It seems that anyone on planet Earth with a pulse is now familiar with the situation at Google in which a male engineer sent a 10-page memo over the company's internal listserv in which he questioned some of Google's diversity policies. As most of us expected when the story became public, Google fired the guy, citing incorrect thoughts about gender at its justification. Not surprisingly, and this is coming from the Mises Wire, we've seen people on both the fake right and the fake left shooting missives at each other via social media and the usual journalistic outlets. From the left, not surprisingly, the engineer who wrote the memo, James Darramore, is a slimy bigot who got what was coming to him. Conservatives see Darramore's memo as being reasonable, but that Google is so politically correct that even a slight deviation from the path of leftist orthodoxy cannot be tolerated. Even some people who consider themselves to be politically and socially liberal are critical of Google's decision to fire Darramore. We like to think of modern high technology firms in the famed Silicon Valley as Google, Apple, Twitter as representing much that is good about our present day. We do like to think that. These companies are full of young, hardworking people who are near genius in their capacity to understand technology and how it can be used used entrepreneurially. As I see it, one of the reasons that federal economic policies, not to mention the predations of the Federal Reserve System, have not created mass destruction of the economy has been the presence of tech-savvy entrepreneurs that continue to foil even the best, or most appropriately worst, efforts of politicians and regulators to block economic progress. They get into the Jim Crow policies. Jim Crow policies that, of course, were brought to you by the fake left. Those are the things they don't like to remember in these days. Is it time we send the old meme around that we saw late last fall? Gosh, I haven't seen fake Democrats this mad since we freed all their slaves. You are listening to The Morning Monarchy, and now I'm looking at the chat. Does that guy that groped Taylor Swift's ass and is now suing her for it tie into this gender bigot blame game BS? I think in a way it does. And I don't know that he's suing her. Is that how it's working? It's the DJ suing Taylor Swift because she claimed he did these things? That's a giant case going on right now. Will Taylor Swift testify? We'll try and see if we can cover some of that coming up Friday on Your Morning Monarchy. Each day of the week on Your Morning Monarchy, we focus in on a different area of the news. Monday's world news. Tuesday is technology. Wednesday is food, health, and environment news. Thursday is dark and disturbing. And Friday, the entertainment industrial complex. And yes, diversity is the word of the year. The Google Manifesto and what it means. You can get this long article from the Mises Wire, and we will include it in the show notes. Let's continue to look at Google, shall we? They've developed a new AI comment moderation system, and they've done it in partnership with the New York Times, The Guardian, The Economist, and Wikipedia. It's at perspectiveapi.com, and there's a couple of examples that WikiLeaks actually tweeted out as screen grabs. Russia annexed Crimea. 0% likely to be perceived as toxic. The CIA armed Islamists in Syria, killing thousands. 66% likely to be perceived as toxic. What if technology could help improve conversations online? Discussing things you care about can be difficult. The threat of abuse and harassment online means that many people stop expressing themselves and give up on seeking different opinions. Introducing Perspective. Perspective is an API that makes it easier to host better conversations. The API uses machine learning models to score the perceived impact a comment might have on a conversation. Developers and publishers can use this score to give real-time feedback to commenters or help moderators do their job, or allow readers to more easily find relevant information as illustrated in the 2 experiments below. We'll be releasing more learning models later in the year, but our first model identifies whether a comment could be perceived as toxic to a discussion. And their first model is about climate change. So this is a machine run by little Eichmanns telling you how to have a conversation. This is everything we've ever seen, everything we've ever laughed at, everything we've ever feared, everything we've joked about in every dystopic novel. This is the memory hole. George Orwell called it Big Brother because he was at the BBC. He was at the British Broadcasting Corporation. Now, a lot of you know how I feel generally about comment sections. They're a big garbage waste of time. Unfortunately, nothing that's much more depressing than even looking at the comments on New World Next Week. So these are the sites that we've been using and loving for years. And now I think the massive, massive pull away is starting to happen. Having a conversation over the weekend with people who actually are worried about a lot of this happening. It's going to take people away from the technology. So one of the stories that we've seen making the rounds maybe isn't as big as it initially seemed. You know, what with the fear of fake news and all. If you thought artificial intelligence was already overhyped to death, last week will give you a heart attack. Last Monday, excitement levels among hacks hit the roof amid claims Facebook had scrambled to shut down its chatbots after they started inventing their own language. Several publications called the programs creepy. Some journalists implied Facebook yanked the plug before, presumably, some kind of superintelligence reared its head. The UK Sun newspaper demanded to know, are machines taking over? Australian telly channel 7 News even went as far as to call it an artificial intelligence emergency. Newsflash. The Register.co.uk says it isn't. It's just a pair of dumb bots exchanging bits of information with one another. Look at a snippet of their conversation. They're hardly speaking in a language, let alone developing one. I everything else. Balls have 0 to me, to me, to me, to me, to me, to me. You, I, everything else. Balls have a ball to me, to me, to me, to me, to me. And further on. Yeah, I know, careful. You guys better be careful. We'll get kicked off our chat server because we're not speaking correctly. So is this Skynet yet or not? The explosion of AI terror headlines last week can be traced to a Facebook project that actually the Register covered back in June. Researchers at the social network giant were trying to teach 2 agents to use dialogue to negotiate with one another. Specifically, the data scientists were trying to get the program to barter over objects. The goal was to train the bots to learn how to plan ahead and communicate effectively to get what they wanted. When they started spewing nonsense, no AI was shut down or killed. Instead, a software bug was found and fixed to get the bots to speak in a more human-like way so the researchers could decipher the results of their own research.
You may have seen some articles announcing the impending doom of humanity, all thanks to one artificial intelligence experiment from Facebook. But its creators want you to know it's really not a big deal. The social media giant wanted to see if it could teach AI bots to negotiate with each other. The bots were tasked with exchanging digital items to see if they could come up with a solution so each got what they wanted. Developers wanted the AI to communicate in English so they could track the bargaining process, but the bots wrote their own language and Facebook stopped the experiment. It's important to note that the project wasn't shut down to prevent the Matrix or anything like that. The developers just upgraded the AI to get it to use English. There are some very smart people like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking who believe AI could be dangerous, but bots haggling over pretend basketballs is probably nothing to worry about. But that didn't stop some outlets from claiming the creepy robots-only language could be how the machines plot their uprising, leading to a Terminator 2 style destruction of humanity. Facebook's engineers say the whole thing has been blown out of proportion. A developer wrote, AI agents inventing their own language is a well-established subfield of AI with publications dating back decades, and that the apocalyptic coverage was, quote, clickbaity and irresponsible.
Well, it's all clickbaity and irresponsible. This just in. Zachary Lipton, incoming assistant professor of machine learning at Carnegie Mellon University, told the Register, the work is interesting, but these are just statistical models, the same as those that Google uses to play board games or that your phone uses to make predictions about what word you're saying in order to transcribe your messages. They're no more sentient than a bowl of noodles or your shoes. Bots babbling away in tongues isn't a new or mysterious phenomenon. Researchers from OpenAI found that agents would talk to one another in a kind of Morse code when forced to communicate and work on a task together. Ryan Lowe, PhD student at McGill and research intern at OpenAI, told the Register, this is a very general phenomenon, and it's nothing to be concerned about. Anytime you have a multi-agent environment, it's often more efficient for them to speak in Morse code. The tasks they face are very limited, and the language they use reflects that. It's very simple and never language-like. Language has a well-defined syntax and grammar. If the rules aren't explicitly taught to the agents, then what comes out won't necessarily be language-like either. Natural language does not emerge naturally. Facebook pulls the plug on language inventing chatbots? The truth. Far be it from us to lecture journos on overreacting, but cripes, calm down, says the Register. Now, meanwhile, our friend Apollo Slater, who was one of the creators behind YouTube killer BitChute, he's got a screen grab of a post he tried over on Facebook, and he's obviously gaming the system to see if it would work, and of course it did. Apollo Slater posted on Facebook, Trump's tranny ban is fantastic. Next, he should ban gays. Afterwards, everyone. We removed something you posted. We removed the post below because it doesn't follow Facebook community standards. So that would be Facebook censoring purely on political bias. That is how they're doing it. They've already talked about all the new idiots they've hired to watch after you and watch what you say. Watch that robocode. I guess we're probably going to have to talk about The Circle again. We talked about it a few months ago when the book and the film were all kind of coming out, but we're living in it. It's quite possible that's why the movie wasn't that successful. It's like, oh yeah, that's the news. We've all been absorbed by our new tech overlords, and we don't know how to live any other way. I actually had someone reach out and say, hey, happy 40th birthday, and, welcome to the 40 Club. I was like, oh, hey, thanks. Yeah, how's 40 been going for you so far? Like, well, political turmoil aside. And that's when I stopped reading. This is one of those people who, again, has completely lost their minds come November 9th, but gave the previous puppet an 8-year pass on all the war, death, and lies. So they love Stasi book. And I would bet a milkshake they were manipulated upon when Facebook was running experiments to see if they could manipulate you into being depressed. So let's head over to YouTube now. We've gone from Google to Alphabet to FriendFace and now back to GooTube. Ever since fake news found its place among the various explanations used by, of course, the Clinton campaign and all their cheerleaders to account for their candidate's loss, there's been a quiet but concerted effort on the part of establishment media, establishment technology, and establishment telecommunications companies to thwart the surging popularity of independent media. The rise of indie media has been hugely detrimental to the once privileged position of the mainstream media, who have now lost the trust of the vast majority of Americans, and along with that trust, their ability to control political and social narratives. That's why everything seems so chaotic now, is because the narratives are running amok. And a lot of them don't make sense. Chief among the groups seeking to clamp down on independent media has been Alphabet Incorporated, Google, massive tech company with deep state connections to the U.S. intelligence community, as well as, of course, U.S. government and business elites, which is essentially part and parcel of the U.S. intelligence community. Since 2015, Google's worked to become the Internet's Ministry of Truth, first through its creation of the First Draft Coalition, and more recently, via major changes made to its search engine that curtail public access to news sites independent of the corporate media. Google's now stepped up its war on free speech and the freedom of the press through its popular subsidiary, YouTube. Last Tuesday, YouTube announced online that it's set to begin censoring content deemed controversial, even if that content does not break any laws or violate YouTube's user agreement. Misleadingly dubbed as an effort to fight terror content online, the new program will review flag content for review through a mix of machine algorithms and human review, guided by standards set up by expert NGOs and institutions that are part of YouTube's Trusted Flagger program. It's more like Trusted False Flagger program. You like that? You can use that one. YouTube stated that such organizations bring expert knowledge of complex issues like hate speech, radicalization, and terrorism. And of course, one of the leading institutions directing the course of this Trusted Flagger program is the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. Initially founded to stop the defamation of Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all, but it's of course gained a reputation over the years of labeling any critic of Israel's government as anti-Semitic. For example, characterizing Israeli policies towards the Palestinians as racist or apartheid-like is considered hate speech by the ADL and is accusing Israel of war crimes or attempted ethnic cleansing, also hate speech. So remember, killing, shooting people, running them over with tractors, okay. Talking about doing that is racist hate speech, so knock it off. The ADL's even described explicitly Jewish organizations who are critical of Israel's government as being anti-Semitic. In addition to labeling of Palestinians' rights activists as extremists, the ADL's also given numerous U.S. conservatives the same label, like Mike Chernovich or Gavin McInnes. Both those guys, though controversial, are extremely popular figures among conservatives and Trump supporters on YouTube and social media. Chernovich's website, Danger and Play, gets nearly 150 million views every month. McInnes, co-founder of Vice Media, also enjoys a wide viewership, with many of his videos boasting millions of views. So there you have it. Trust it all to non-governmental organizations. Let's put all our faith in NGOs. Hell, let's just put all our faith in our new tech overlords. I, for one, am excited about our new tech overlords, right? That's what they say. So, almost 2 years ago, when we quit our commercial radio job, and a lot of these things all tie in. Good God, I can't imagine what it would have been like being at the commercial radio station during America's Next Top President. I got out about a year ahead of time, fortunately. And when we relaunched Media Monarchy, one of the things we did was move all the Media Monarchy blogs. I used to have separate blogs for food and for Cyberspace War and for Holy Hexes. I brought all of those out of Google. They were all free on Blogspot. Took all of those out of Google, took everything off of GoDaddy, and moved to a new server, and everything is under one new mighty MediaMonarchy.com. Now what do we see happening from the fine folks at GoDaddy? They're pulling people's websites. Domain name retailer and hosting outfit GoDaddy has given a right-wing website that describes itself as the world's most genocidal Republican website 24 hours to find new hosting company. And I think that 24 hours is probably running up because this story was posted early yesterday morning. GoDaddy's decision came after activists pointed out that a site called The Daily Stormer made extraordinarily vulgar and disparaging remarks about Heather Heyer, the woman killed when a man police have identified as James Alex Fields, hashtag car ramming drove his car into a crowd of so-called anti-racism protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia. Police have charged Lee with second-degree murder. The Register chooses not to quote or link to the site's remarks on grounds that it's difficult to imagine more insensitive language being used to describe a recently deceased person or a more sexist depiction of a woman being used under almost any circumstances. So Register won't even go there. GoDaddy revealed its action on Twitter for everyone to see. We informed the Daily Stormer they have 24 hours to move to another provider as they have violated our terms of service. Terms of service meaning anything we suddenly deem politically expedient to kick you off. I mean, that's the thing. Everybody should just have signs on the door that says, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. I don't want to make you a cake because you're gay. Well, fuck you. We'll go to a different baker. Activists welcomed GoDaddy's actions. They were okay with they're okay with what's the race car chick splayed all over the website. She used to be their spokesperson. We're okay with Danica Patrick showing her tits all over the site. That's great. We love that. But now this is just too bad. So-called activists welcomed GoDaddy's actions. Some have since pointed out that the right-wing site uses Cloudflare as its content distribution network, while others are investigating which companies help it to serve advertisements in the hope of drying up its revenue stream. Now, Cloudflare, I believe we've noted in recent months, has been totally hacked and exploited. So get some red hat, black hat hackers and go in there and you can find all of their stuff. Then you can expose all those people, because that's what's happening right now. It is the pitchfork mob, which is digital pitchforks. Don't run afoul of the digital pitchfork mobs. They will dox the shit out of you and ruin your life because of things you said on the internet. Late last week, accommodation booking website Airbnb closed the accounts of right-wing activists after it learned they plan to use the service to find lodgings ahead of a planned protest in Charlottesville.
A white supremacist website called Daily Stormer lost its web domain as part of the outcry around events this weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia. It all went down after a Twitter user pointed out to web hosting service GoDaddy that the neo-Nazi publication used obscene language when referring to Heather Heyer. She was the counter-protester killed after an alleged white supremacist rammed his car into a crowd, injuring another 19 people. So GoDaddy then responded in kind, posting on Twitter that it had just let the Daily Stormer know it had 24 hours to move to another domain provider because it had violated GoDaddy's terms of service. To refresh your minds, GoDaddy is the world's largest internet domain registrar with 17 million customers. GoDaddy went on to tell TechCrunch that since the latest article on the neo-Nazi site comes on the immediate heels of the hot mess in Virginia, it felt it could be responsible for inciting additional violence. The web domain behemoth is just the latest company to distance itself from white supremacist users. Airbnb canceled a bunch of accounts last week after they made bookings for the Unite the Right rally. But let's not forget that the Southern Poverty Law Center claims it warned GoDaddy about Daily Stormer months ago, and even has an entire page of its site devoted to the hateful things the Daily Stormer's founder has said. Issues around protected speech versus terms of service are likely to continue reverberating around tech companies large and small, so we'll be watching that.
Yeah, suck it, ADL. SPLC was up on telling people about things to be mad about way before you. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, your host, webmaster, DJ, band name mangler. Glad you're here. It's the Tech Tuesday edition of your Morning Monarchy. It's Frank and I serving up some fear-free news for you. Interestingly enough, late last night, our buddy Matt of Convince Yourself Media tweeted at me and said, hey, look, this day in history, Wikipedia shows CIA page edits. I was like, dude, we already talked about that today. He hadn't heard yesterday's episode. On yesterday's episode, on this day in history, we noted on Media Monarchy, posted August 14th, 2007, who's editing Wikipedia? Diebold, CIA, and Walmart. Our buddy Matt hadn't actually listened to yesterday's episode, and he said, sync! He came across the story because he was reading over on Washington's blog a story from February 20th, 2015. Crimea, was it seized by Russia, or did Russia block its seizure by the U.S.? This article, written by Eric Zeus, both before and after Crimea left Ukraine and joined Russia in a public referendum on March 16, 2014, the Gallup organization polled Crimeans on behalf of the U.S. government and found them to be extremely pro-Russian and anti-American and also anti-Ukrainian. Neither poll was subsequently published because the results of each were the opposite of what the sponsor had wished. Both polls were done on behalf of the U.S. government in order to find Crimeans' attitudes toward the United States and towards Russia, and also towards Ukraine, not only before but also after the planned U.S. coup in Ukraine, which occurred in February 2014, but was actually kicked off on November 20th, 2013, the day before Ukraine's democratically elected president Viktor Yanukovych publicly announced that Ukraine had received a better economic offer from Russia's Eurasian Economic Community than from Americans' European. Why is my alarm going off? It's not time to do push-ups yet. Stand by. The EEC subsequently became the Eurasian Economic Union, now that it was clear that Ukraine was going to go with the EU. That decision by Yanukovych in favor of the EEC was mistakenly thought by him to be merely an economic one, and he didn't know the extent to which the U.S. government had set up an operation to overthrow him if he didn't go along with the EU's offer. If some of these basic historical facts don't come through from merely the Wikipedia articles alone, that's because the CIA is among the organizations that edit Wikipedia articles, and so Wikipedia is unwittingly a political propaganda vehicle. It is especially used for propaganda by the CIA and FBI. So our buddy Matt, doing research about Crimea and Russia, as has been noted previously by our friends WikiLeaks. Remember, 0% toxic statement, Russia annexed Crimea. 66% toxic statement, CIA armed Islamists in Syria. So we can hop back to that article we talked about yesterday. Wikipedia shows CIA page edits, an online tool that claims to reveal the identity of organizations that edit Wikipedia pages, has revealed that the CIA was involved in editing entries. That's from the BBC. How about Reuters? CIA FBI computers used for Wikipedia edits. That's August 16th, 2007. People using CIA and FBI computers have edited entries in the online encyclopedia Wikipedia on topics including the Iraq War and the Guantanamo prison. The program is called Wikiscanner. And again, that's decade-old news. If they were doing it then, don't you think they're doing it now? What was just the comments over in our chat? I think they're being made by real humans. All the articles, all the garbage in the Washington Compost, and even the comments. This is greatest article ever written. It's all fake. It's all garbage. It's all a complete waste of time. That's what I've always joked about Reddit. Oh, you know how awesome comment sections are on websites? Imagine a whole website with nothing but comments. As we start to wrap up our cyberspace war coverage, let's flip on the boob tube, shall we? As Disney wants to own a bigger piece of the streaming pie, the company announced during its latest earnings report last Tuesday that it intends to remove its movies from Netflix. Instead, Disney plans to launch a branded direct-to-consumer streaming service in 2019, starting in the US and then expanding globally.
Disney is ditching Netflix to launch its own streaming service. The company announced plans to end its distribution agreement with Netflix and launch its own streaming service sometime in 2019. Let's dig into why. Disney invested $1 billion into BAMTech last year, giving it a 33% minority stake. Then this week, Disney announced an additional $1.58 billion investment and now owns 75% of the company that will power its shift into streaming. BAMTech, who powers streaming for MLB, HBO Now, NHL, WWE, and now Disney and ESPN's upcoming streaming services, is valued at $3.75 billion, following Disney's new investment. BAMTech spun out of MLB's digital media business to become its own company in August 2015. The business has since grown beyond being a streaming technology just for baseball. So basically, instead of building their own in-house platform, Disney invested heavily in technology tested on other media properties first that they can then use to build their own subscription service. Disney doing standalone streaming is huge news, but it's not the first time the company has dabbled with digital delivery of its content. It has its own Disney Movies Anywhere app and dipped its toe into the streaming business with its UK-based subscription video platform, Disney Life, back in 2015. But Disney's deal to own the infrastructure player behind its next big investment in streaming is a smart move. While its flagship Disney and Pixar movies will bring in subscribers, Disney has already begun the development process at the Disney Channel and studio to create original TV shows and movies that will be made exclusive to the new service. Essentially, Disney is mimicking the Netflix model here, with an attempt to create must-see shows and films that you can't find anywhere else. And if you're wondering why Marvel and Star Wars weren't mentioned in Disney's upcoming streaming service, that is because they might be getting their own branded services instead. The decision has not yet been set in stone, but with BAMTech on the back end, Disney has the technical capability to make that happen. If Disney wanted to go the route of standalone streaming services for all its brands, it has more than enough content to do it. There are TV shows like ABC's Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Inhumans, Freeform's Cloak and Dagger and New Warriors, Disney's XD's Star Wars Rebels, online content plus all the movies and more when all these licensing deals expire. According to Disney CEO Bob Iger, the company has no plans to pull its Marvel TV shows from Netflix, adding that Disney and Netflix have a great relationship. He also said that the possibility still exists that Disney will license other titles to Netflix down the road.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I know you actually got a little dumber there during that clip. So, some think too little too late for the Disney, Star Wars, Marvel machine, that they won't beat Netflix. That remains to be seen. Quote-unquote original shows. So that's some must-flee TV, and the last couple of stories we'll mention here on your Cyberspace War headlines. A new report raises big questions about last year's DNC hack. Former NSA experts say it wasn't a hack at all, but a leak, an inside job by someone with access to the DNC's system. That article by Patrick Lawrence on The Nation. Now, let's see. Let's run a search on The Nation for the Awan brothers. Womp womp. They're not mentioned in that article, shocker. But at least they're starting to note that their stories have fallen apart and don't make any sense, so they're starting to look at things that might actually make sense. Our final story here on Cyberspace War transitions us quite well into tomorrow's Food World Order news, as Forbes has a list of 5 food apps that make it easy to eat sustainably. Now, I have not used and am not endorsing any of these apps, but anytime we can figure out a good way to get more information to make better decisions, that's a good idea. And just like we've been talking about for many, many, many moons here in the Media Monarchy Kingdom, make your refrigerator your medicine cabinet. Let your food be your medicine. So the 5 apps: Happy Cow, How Good, Good Guide, EWG Food Score, that's the Environmental Working Group, and Seafood Watch. So some of these 5 apps you might take along with you to the grocery store, so you might be able to make better decisions about what companies you do or don't want to support. That's almost a full job in and of itself, and we should probably do a better job of following those things, but we always try and tell you when companies have sold out. And that's usually why we make different shopping decisions, because we find out companies sell out to Unilever, and we maybe don't want to give them money. There's really no excuse to be ignorant in those ways anymore. That's your Cyberspace War news, all those stories shared by you, and we appreciate you using hashtag Cyberspace War for all the news of inner and outer space. Speaking of outer space, we got a bumpin' song for our Song of the Day today by a group that calls themselves Moon Boots. That's coming up in just a few minutes, but of course we take our always important stroll down this day in history, because why? Past is prologue. August 15th, 1824, the Marquis de Lafayette, the last surviving French general of the American Revolutionary War, arrives in New York and begins a tour of 24 states. The Marquis de Lafayette being the man who gave my hometown its name, and even home county its name, Fayetteville and Fayette County in West by God, Virginia. August 15th, 1914, a servant of American architect Frank Lloyd Wright murders 7 and sets fire to the living quarters of Wright's Wisconsin home, Taliesin. August 15th, 1915, a story in the New York World newspaper reveals that the Imperial German government had purchased excess phenol from Thomas Edison that could be used to make explosives for the war effort, but they diverted it to Bayer for aspirin production. They were also making some gas as well. August 15th, 1935, I guess it was still a few years from the gas. August 15th, 1935, Will Rogers and Wiley Post are killed after their aircraft develops engine problems during takeoff in Barrow, Alaska. On this day in 1939, The Wizard of Oz appears, or rather premieres, at Grauman's Chinese Theater in L.A. August 15th, 1965, the Beatles played to nearly 60,000 fans at Shea Stadium in New York City, an event later regarded as the birth of stadium rock. Maybe they should have aborted that one. Giant money, far away, music sounds terrible. It sounds like a perfect things for the powers that shouldn't be. That's why we always recommend you go see club shows and put the money in the band's hand. Speaking of money in the band's hand, August 15th, on this day in 1969, the Woodstock Music Festival opens on a patch of farmland in White Lake, a hamlet in the upstate New York town of Bethel.
The folk rock music festival, which brought 350,000 people to a rural area 2 hours from New York City, finally ended at dawn's early light. But while the music is over, the aftertaste lingers on.
This is one reason Max Yasker's neighbors are upset because he leased his farm to a rock music festival. This is another. More than 350,000 people, mostly young people, showed up to hear the greatest rock groups in the country. The promoters billed it as 3 days of peace and music. And for most people, it was just that. Little thanks to the promoters. There were many problems, like not enough sanitation facilities, food, or water. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, yes. How long have you been here?
About 3 weeks. Roberto's been here 3 weeks, so I live here most of my life.
You're from Spain.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying the festival?
Yeah, it's outside. It's beautiful.
Why did you come to the festival?
To see the best music in the world, man. It's great. La música, no?
Claro.
He's a musician.
How about the problems that people have been talking about? Those things bother you? Water and shortage of food?
We've been locked out of our car without any money for 3 days. No sleeping bag, so I guess it isn't bothering us too much.
There were thousands of minor injuries and some major medical problems.
Well, it all comes down to, taking care of yourself, man, all of us have to take care of ourselves, and some people know how and some people don't. Some people get out in the woods, they don't know how to live.
And there was, as one would expect with 350,000 20th century youth, drugs.
I think the thing is more people around here than dope, though.
You don't think it's getting out of hand?
No, I don't think anything's out of control. Everything I've seen has been a very together thing. It's turning people on to a different kind of living from the city. That's what's happening out here.
It'll be 2 or 3 days before all the people leave the peace and quiet of the Catskill Mountains. It may be longer before this area returns to normal. Despite the problems, and there were many problems, though they were not as great as many people believed, this weekend says a lot about the youth of America. More than 350,000 people came looking for peace and music. Many said they learned a lot about themselves and learned a lot about getting along together and priorities. And for most, that alone makes it all worthwhile. Lem Tucker, NBC News, in upstate New York.
So they have this racket, and it plays the music for a little while, and then it's got the sneering smirk of a wrap-up at the end of this clip.
Good night for NBC News.
Good night. I can't even say the full sentence because of my editorial laughing at these dumb kids who didn't go to business school. That's this day in history. It kicked off on this day, August 15th. Woodstock Music and Art Fair opens in upstate New York, featuring some of the top rock musicians of the era, but no British artists. Continuing to look at this day in history, August 15th, 1971, President Richard Milhouse Nixon completes the break from the gold standard and ending convertibility of the United States dollar into gold by foreign investors. August 15th, 1977, the Big Ear, a radio telescope operated by Ohio State University as part of the SETI project, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, receives a radio signal from deep space. The event is named the WOW signal from the notation made by a volunteer on the project. We actually talked about that this last year on Morning Monarchy. Isn't it also Elvis's death day? It might be technically the 16th, but that's the other 1977 event, because that's another thing that happened the week I was born. Elvis Costello's debut album came out, and Elvis Presley shuffled off this mortal coil. August 15th, 1979, Led Zeppelin's In Through the Outdoor was released, their last album released by the band prior to the death of John Bonham. August 15th, 1991, Paul Simon played a free show in Central Park in front of an estimated 750,000 people. August 15th, 1995, in South Carolina, Shannon Faulkner becomes the first female cadet matriculated at the Citadel. She quits a week later. Less than a week later. August 15th, 2013, the Smithsonian announces the discovery of Olinguito, the first new carnivorous species found in the Americas in 35 years. And 2 years ago today, August 15th, 2015, North Korea moves its clock back half an hour to introduce Pyongyang time, 8.5 hours ahead of UTC. That kind of reminds me of George Carlin. Like, it's 6 p.m. in D.C. It's 5:20 in Baltimore. Published to Media Monarchy a decade ago today. U.S. spy satellites to be used on Americans. The U.S.'s top intelligence official has greatly expanded the range of federal and local authorities who can get access to information from the nation's vast network of spy satellites in the U.S. That's from the Wall Street Journal. And the other article published to Media Monarchy a decade ago today. NYPD warns of homegrown terror threat. Average citizens who quietly band together and adopt radical ways pose a mounting threat to American security that could exceed that of established terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, a new police analysis has concluded. Both those articles published to my own website a decade ago today. Celebrating birthdays, the Napoleon Bonaparte, born on this day, 1769. It's also pianist, violinist, composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor's birthday. Spy for the State, Julia Child, who sometimes cook, born on this day. Rosa Marie from the Dick Van Dyke Show. It's also famed Canadian pianist and composer Oscar Peterson, the late great, born on this day. British director Nicholas Roeg, born on this day. He directed films like The Man Who Fell to Earth. It's also Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer's birthday, Stanley Milgram's birthday, crazy-ass Maxine Waters' birthday. Singer-songwriter Jimmy Webb, Bill Gates' wife Melinda, born on this day, Deborah Messing, CIA agent Ben Affleck, and everybody's favorite movie star, Jennifer Lawrence. Those folks celebrating birthdays today. I doubt any one of those will make their way into our daily DJ set at noon because it is a Tech Tuesday, and we like to keep it a little electronic style. We'll have some new music for you coming up in your Pump Up the Volume, and to wet that whistle, music out of Brooklyn. They call themselves Moon Boots. We got a little song called Keep the Faith to send you off on this day. And that does it, my friends. Glad you're here. Hope you spread the word about Media Monarchy. I know you hear about us on Corporate Report and you know about us from New World Next Week, but we still need your support. We're maybe not as popular as you might perceive us. We can only get by with your support at MediaMonarchy.com/support, and we are live Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Pacific Time at MediaMonarchy.com/listen, and a huge thanks to you. That's the Tech Tuesday edition of your Morning Monarchy, Cyberspace War style, August 15th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Thanking you again for listening and reminding you, as always, my friends, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.